potential likely role in that, if at all?
Again, the Department of War is currently investigating this matter, but again, I will reaffirm that the Department of War and the United States Armed Forces do not target civilians, as does the Iranian regime, who kill and execute their own people. Christian.
On two separate issues, Caroline. First, what can you tell us about the military operation in Ecuador? And then secondly, is the president considering invoking the Defense Production Act to boost munition stockpiles while we are in this conflict?
It's not something I've heard the president consider, but as you know, the president has been in pretty direct correspondence and public correspondence with defense contractors, asking them to aggressively speed up their manufacturing of American-made weapons, which again are the best in the world. With respect to Ecuador, I would point you back to the statement released by the U.S. Southern Command. On March 3rd, Ecuadorian and U.S. military forces launched operations against designated terrorist organizations. These operations are a powerful example of the commitment of partners in Latin America and the Caribbean to combat the scourge of narcotics. We are taking decisive action to confront narco-terrorists who have long inflicted terror, violence, and corruption on citizens throughout the hemisphere. And on that, I would also add that this weekend, I'm pleased to announce, the president will welcome the heads of state from 12 nations across our Western Hemisphere in Miami, Florida on Saturday. The point of this newfound Latin America summit is to promote freedom, security, and prosperity in our region. The following countries will be in attendance: Argentina, Bolivia, Chile, Costa Rica, the Dominican Republic, Ecuador, El Salvador, Honduras, Panama, Paraguay, Trinidad and Tobago, and maybe some others as well. And the president will be speaking with the leaders of this country who have really formed a historic coalition to work together to address criminal narco-terrorist gangs and cartels and counter illegal and mass migration into not only the United States, but the Western Hemisphere, which remains a key and top priority of this president. Thank you very much, everyone, and you'll see the president yourselves in an hour.
Thank you, Caroline.
Thank you, Caroline.
Welcome to NTD Newsroom. I'm Don Ma, and you were just watching the White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt giving a press briefing to reporters, mostly taking questions on Operation Epic Fury. And Caroline said that there was, in fact, imminent threat to the United States, responding to one of the questions there, and also asking the press to cover this whole situation fairly, also to highlight the successes of the U.S. military and what has done in Israel. Okay, now let's go on to our top story today. The Department of War has identified 4 of the 6 American soldiers who died during Operation Epic Fury. Secretary of War Hegseth addressed U.S. casualties during the press briefing this morning.
Much was made of the volume of missiles Iran was able to shoot in the first few days. And sadly, as we projected, a few got through and killed 6 of our best, who will hopefully arrive home soon. We will avenge them, no doubt.
The Pentagon yesterday announcing the deaths of Army Reserve Captain Cody Cork, Sergeant First Class Noah Tegens, Sergeant First Class Nicole Amor, and Sergeant Declan Cody. In a statement, the department said they were killed Sunday in Kuwait. The incident is under investigation. The United States Army Reserve expressed its condolences to the families. Secretary of War Pete Hegseth saying the U.S. is winning in the war against Iran. He says the U.S. will have complete control over the country's airspace in the coming days. The secretary was speaking to a press briefing this morning along with General Dan Kane, chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. Take a listen.
I stand before you today with one unmistakable message about Operation Epic Fury. America is winning, decisively, devastatingly, and without mercy. And we have only just begun to hunt, dismantle, demoralize, destroy, and defeat their capabilities, just 4 days in. Starting last night and to be completed in a few days, in under a week, the 2 most powerful air forces in the world will have complete control of Iranian skies, uncontested airspace.
Iran's theater ballistic missile shots fired are down 86% from the first day of fighting, with a 23% decrease just in the last 24 hours. And their one-way attack drone shots are down 73% from the opening days. This progress has allowed CENTCOM to establish localized air superiority across the southern flank of the Iranian coast and penetrate their defenses with overwhelming precision and firepower. We will now begin to expand inland, striking progressively deeper into Iranian territory and creating additional freedom of maneuver for U.S. forces.
Both officials say the U.S. military has enough munitions for ongoing operations against Iran, with Hegseth adding, quote, "Iran cannot outlast us." He says more bombers and fighters will arrive today. Hegseth also saying that a torpedo from a U.S. submarine sank an Iranian ship. He did not reveal the name of the ship, but Sri Lanka announcing today at least 80 people were killed in a submarine strike on an Iranian warship.
Yesterday, in the Indian Ocean, and we'll play it on the screen there, an American submarine sunk an Iranian warship that thought it was safe in international waters. Instead, it was sunk by a torpedo. Quiet death. The first sinking of an enemy ship by a torpedo since World War II.
Hegseth also reporting that the military killed the Iranian leader behind an alleged plot to assassinate President Trump. He says that target was not the original focus of the war effort, adding that those responsible were eventually placed on the target list. Hegseth did not name the individual. In 2024, the U.S. Justice Department charged an Iranian man in connection to a plot to assassinate Trump, who was then president-elect.
We've known for a long time that Iran had intentions on trying to kill President Trump and or other U.S. officials. And while that was not the focus of the effort by any stretch of the imagination, in fact, never raised by the president or anybody else, I ensured and others ensured that those who were responsible for that were eventually part of the target list. We eventually had the opportunity to do that from the air.
Turkey says a fired missile from Iran was intercepted and destroyed by NATO defense systems. The incident marks the first time the alliance member has been drawn into the Middle East conflict. Turkey's defense ministry today saying the missile crossed airspace in Iraq and Syria before heading toward Turkey. Here's more.
NATO intercepted the threat before it entered Turkish airspace. Debris that fell in southern Turkey was identified as part of the interceptor missile. Officials report no casualties or injuries. Turkey warned that it has the right to respond to any hostile act and urged all parties to avoid further escalation, adding it will continue discussions with NATO and allied partners. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth says there was no sense that the incident would trigger Article 5, which has only been invoked once before after the 9/11 attacks. Article 5 states that an attack on one NATO member is an attack on all members.
The U.S.-Israeli joint operation in the Middle East is continuing. Israel launching a new wave of strikes targeting Iran and Lebanon today. In a post on X, the IDF said it struck a major paramilitary of Iran's Revolutionary Guard. It also targeted internal security command centers in Tehran. The IDF said the sites were used by the Iranian regime to maintain control across the country. In Beirut, massive explosions shook the city this morning. The IDF urged people to evacuate Beirut's southern suburbs, saying Israel would strike Hezbollah targets in the area. Iran and the Lebanese terrorist group Hezbollah launched a combined attack on Israel today. Interception trails were seen over the Tel Aviv area and loud booms were heard. Iran has fired regular missiles and drones at Israel, though the most of the incoming fire has been intercepted. Meanwhile, American and Israeli forces say they're striking Iranian targets nonstop. U.S. government personnel are on the move. The State Department has ordered non-emergency staff and their families at consulates in parts of Pakistan to leave the country. Here's more.
The specific locations concerned are Lahore and Karachi. Pakistan shares a nearly 600-mile border with Iran. The department cited ongoing threats of drone and missile attacks from Iran, along with disruptions to commercial flights. Officials also warned of a risk of terrorist violence, including attacks and other hostile activity in Pakistan. Staff at the U.S. Embassy in Islamabad were not affected. Tensions escalated after at least 22 pro-Iranian demonstrators were shot and killed in Karachi after trying to storm the U.S. consulate. Tensions in Karachi escalated after violent clashes between protesters and security forces left at least 22 people dead and more than 120 injured.
Joining us now is Adam Hardage, Special Operations Combat Veteran and former CIA Operations Officer. And we also have geopolitical strategist Darren Gobb. He's a retired lieutenant colonel who served in the U.S. Army as a Black Hawk helicopter pilot and battalion commander. First of all, good afternoon to you both. Thank you for joining us. Now, today, Secretary of War Pete Hegseth gave us a unique perspective of this war. And I have the clip here. Let's take a listen.
This was never meant to be a fair fight, and it is not a fair fight. We are punching them while they're down, which is exactly how it should be. Thus far, Operation Epic Fury has delivered twice the air power of shock and awe of Iraq in 2003, minus Paul Bremer and the nation building. The campaign has 7 times the intensity of Israel's previous operations against Iran during the 12-day war. 7 times.
So, Adam, twice the power as Iraq compared to Iraq, and then 7 times compared to the 12-day war, and, you know, saying this is not a fair fight. Your reactions upon hearing this?
Yeah, well, I mean, what you're hearing is basically, a prize fighter kind of discussion. It's very much a departure from what you would see historically from diplomatic circles within the U.S. And I think this president and Secretary Hegseth are trying to send a very clear message to American enemies around the world that, the old school is gone and this is a very different way of doing business and that they are deadly serious about it. So, I mean, I figure, after what we've seen in Venezuela with Maduro and then Mexico with El Mencho and now Iran with the Ayatollahs, I think the world is sitting up and taking notice that this administration means very serious business and they intend to leverage American capabilities to achieve their desired end state and outcome, no matter what the cost.
So, Colonel, can I go to you now? What are you thinking after hearing the intensity that the U.S. military is bringing upon Iran?
Well, this is how it's supposed to be done. When you're going into combat, you're not supposed to want to engage in a fair fight. You're supposed to want to go in to win and win overwhelmingly because that saves your lives ultimately. It ends the battle faster because you overwhelm the enemy to the point where they capitulate a whole lot faster, or if they're not even there to capitulate, of course, then it's already over. You don't go into a fight sitting there hoping that it is somehow equal all the way to the end and that you just pull ahead right at the finish line. It's not how this is supposed to work. So from what I'm seeing and what I'm getting out of people in theater, this is exactly what we want to be able to see. You have to go into a place like Iran and overwhelm them very quickly because they have so many assets that if you let them, if you try to whittle them away slowly, it'll never work. And so I agree with the method. I think the language is correct.
But Adam, we have to talk about the Americans still in the Middle East who are at risk. The U.S. is facilitating charter flights from a number of countries for citizens. So Secretary of State, state official Dylan Johnston saying that since February 28th, over 17,000 American citizens have returned to the United States from the Middle East. Over 8,500 American citizens returning to the U.S. yesterday alone, and the job is not done yet. So on this, what are the risks that Americans are facing in the Middle East right now, Adam?
Sure. I would say probably the biggest risk is just, a casualty of being there, getting caught in the crossfire type thing. So you see this a lot. And frankly, there's been a lot of disruption to all the embassies across the region. So whether you're talking about Saudi Arabia, Iraq, Jordan, the list kind of goes on, and it's really become a situation where you have kind of multiple non-combatant evacuation operations on a small scale happening across the region. So there's obviously threats to U.S. service members, from remote attacks, especially nowadays. You've got drone warfare is becoming a major, probably the leading factor in battle. lone drone warfare is very cheap. It's you kind of democratize lethality to the lowest common bidder, and I think we're seeing a lot of that play out, and I think that will just continue to rise. And I would also like to echo what the Colonel said. I completely agree with him. If you're going to go into war, then it should be decisive, and it needs to be brutal. It needs to be swift. It should not be something where we get into these endless wars where we don't have any real clear objectives or desire to actually win. So I completely echo his sentiments.
Right, and the administration is saying that this operation is ahead of schedule a number of times now. So, Colonel Gobb, a similar question to you on this topic. Some are asking whether the administration did enough to get Americans out of the region before this operation. So, just your overall comments here. What is the usual protocol, and was it followed?
Well, I would say that the protocol largely looks like it has been followed to the best extent they can without risking operational security. Because let's just say you were to put out a warning that said, evacuate every embassy and everything by this time on this day. Well, that becomes something that gets picked up on very quickly and can be something that actually puts operations at risks. So, and also, by the way, Iran has expanded what they're doing beyond what some probably anticipated, and their willingness to launch missiles against targets all over the Middle East, out to Turkey, and potentially even going directly east towards, say a Pakistan or Afghanistan for their own reasons. And so you're dealing with an Iran that seems to be on its death rattle, and it's just lashing out at everybody and making more enemies. I think they're doing this right. Ultimately, there's always risk. There's no perfect way to do this, but they've made the assets available. They've advertised the phone numbers and made the systems there. And I can promise you, having used it, the system works. When you put your information in with the Secretary of State's office and say, I need help here, here's my contact, that works. I think you're going to see this play out relatively well, considering what I'm seeing now.
So, Adam, in addition to American citizens, there's also service members who are being impacted right now. Here's Hegseth earlier today talking about this.
Much was made of the volume of missiles Iran was able to shoot in the first few days. And sadly, as we projected, a few got through and killed 6 of our best, who will hopefully arrive home soon. We will avenge them, no doubt.
Adam, President Trump said a couple days ago casualties could rise. Your thoughts on this situation?
Yeah, it's the profession of arms, and that very well in times of conflict, bullets go both ways. Is the old adage, and I would say that for the people that are concerned about troops in harm's way, obviously we don't want Americans getting hurt, but at the same time, in order to achieve these objectives, there's a reason why the men and women put on the uniform, and when called to duty, they will go fulfill that duty. As a veteran of 4 wars, Iraq, Afghanistan, West Africa, and Jordan, Syria, it's something that you do, and you certainly say your prayers and you get your mind right with yourself, your mission, and with God, and leave it up to the universe and go carry out your duties to the best of your ability.
And Colonel Gobb, anything you'd like to add to that?
Now, Adam's right. Ultimately, you put on the uniform, you raise your hand, you accept the risk. You know what could happen. You certainly pray that it doesn't. But I would remind people, too, that this is going to play especially hard in the state of Iowa, where they already lost members of their state in the attacks in Syria. And it sounds like Adam and I have gone over many of the same pieces of terrain. We know the risks in the Middle East in general and in combat specifically. So pray for the best, but do your duty and stay focused on that.
So, Adam, to your previous comment, I'd like to follow up on that because some U.S. lawmakers are calling this a war of choice by Trump. How do you respond to arguments that the U.S. shouldn't start conflicts such as this because it puts U.S. service members in danger?
Yeah, well, that's the nature of the business. If you're going to go into the business of arms, then you have to be prepared to potentially, pay the ultimate price for it. I'm not dismissing any concerns that people have. It's certainly being concerned and taking the best care that we can of our service members is this administration's priority and everything else. But to say that, it's just a war of convenience or something that didn't need to be done. It's a little bit irresponsible, I would say. I think, the president's been very clear about his objectives. I think he's also a brilliant tactician and strategist in the sense that he won't commit, to these endless wars, and he won't put boots on the ground that don't need to be there or aren't going to be able to achieve a clear national objective. And so, I support what the administration is doing. I hear a lot of people say, we're just doing Israel's bidding or whatnot, and I don't see that to be the case. In this case, I do believe, obviously, that we need to support our allies in the region and across the world. But at the end of the day, when Iran has been negotiated with for 47 years and it hasn't worked, and so at some point, you have to take action. And you telegraph that and let the world know that it was going to happen if they didn't come to the table, and they didn't, and now here we are.
So, Colonel, talk to us a bit more about the cost of lives here. What in your view, is the right balance in minimizing casualties and also achieving the mission objectives?
Well, that's a difficult one to answer because what you're trying to do is go in there with the expectation that you'd like to leave with no casualties whatsoever, but they're going to happen. So there's no numerical ratio you can put on something like this. You have to lay out your objectives and then you build a plan around the best possible scenario you can to maximize the chances of your people's survival. And that goes back to overwhelming force again. And that by doing that, you put your people in much less risk. And to that question again about is this a war of choice? I would tell you, the number already came up that Adam mentioned. Iran's been at war with us for 47 years. We just have forgotten that we were supposed to be really kind of fighting back instead of constantly taking the punches. We're punching back now, and casualties are to be expected. We certainly don't want any, but I guarantee you that the fact that we're talking about no boots on the ground is indicative of the fact that we're not going to go in there with Army and Marine Corps units on the ground to try to do something in Iran. That right there reduces any chances reduces greatly the chance of casualties of any kind. And I think that's where it needs to stop is, we do not need to go into the ground in this country at all.
So Adam, respond to this. Some U.S. lawmakers are depicting service members as victims here, being put in harm's way against their will.
I would just say, that's just political theater, and frankly, it's also disrespectful. American servicemen and women sign up. They sign their name on the bottom line, and they understand that is an oath that is in blood potentially. That's why war is a young man or a young woman's game. And, because the older we get, the more we realize maybe we want to stick around for a little while longer once we have kids and stuff. But the courage that are exhibited by Americans' armed forces are just frankly inspiring and awesome to see. And, I give kudos to the boys and girls that are out there today doing it. And I understand that, harm may come to you, but that's the risk we take. And so, you do the best you can. You reduce risk to mission, risk of force. You come up with the best plan you can. And then when it comes down to it, you got to execute. So the best thing that we could ask for, our lawmakers is for lawmakers to show a little gumption and support for the troops that are actually over there in harm's way doing their duty.
So Colonel Gobb, I started with Adam, so I want to end with you. How do we honor those who risk their lives in wars such as this? Hegseth today talked about avenging them, but in your view, how do we best honor these fallen U.S. service members?
Well, leave the vengeance mission to the military. We'll take care of our own. I promise you that. For everybody else out there who thinks they never know what to do or if they can do enough for the sake of what the military has done for this nation and for people around the world, I would tell you just to live an honorable, peaceful life that makes that sacrifice worth it. Be a husband or a father or a parent of any kind, mom, whatever that is, raise your kids well, be a good spouse or be a good child, whatever that is. If you lead an honorable life, you will have made their sacrifice worthy and that's all it takes.
Okay, terrific comments from both of you. Colonel Gobb, Adam, thank you so much for speaking with us.
Thanks, Tom.
Thank you. Appreciate your time.
The Chinese regime has called for Iran, the U.S., and Israel to stop fighting, citing impacts to global economic growth. An analyst says China could be hurt the most in this war. We come back with a discussion.
This is such a gentle painting, so beautifully portrayed.
A group of people reading together in this simple, everyday-looking living room. A young girl reading along with an adult, a grandparent sitting in the lotus position, a businessman in his typical suit.
You see all those people, they look like they have quietly settled down there. And you as a viewer, it looks like you've just stepped in the door.
You can't see what it is they're reading, so you're a little bit curious and you're kind of invited to walk in.
This harmonious feeling is not by accident. It is the very subject of the work. The book they are reading is the main text of Falun Gong, which is an ancient Chinese spiritual discipline in the Buddhist tradition. At the core of Falun Gong are the values of truthfulness, compassion, and forbearance. Unfortunately, the practice is banned in China, where the artist resides. Thousands have been killed for their faith. Golden energy blooms into the room as a result of their steadfast faith. The painting on the back wall reminds us of this work's title, Plum Blossoms in a Muddy World.
It's also a metaphor for the practitioners that are sitting in the room as plum blossoms.
They signify perseverance and hope that all brutal winters end and life is renewed once again.
It's a magical painting.
First time that I went to see him, a lot of stuff came into my mind because I wasn't prepared at all. I know the first 3 months of his life were really important, and I wanted to be there all the time for him. First time he was like, "Daddy, Daddy." That was one of his first words. He grew up so quick. He just surprised me every day. He's really smart. I really think he can be an astronaut, president. But I must support him for wherever he wants to be. Whether you want to be a photographer, musician, whatever. As a father, I guess you don't focus on you. I put himself first. That's what a dad does.
There are real consequences to controlled media. And NTD's founders know them firsthand. Our freedom of thought is the price. This is the lesson that guides us in everything we do.
So there's the tear gas there.
We know the value of a free society. And we take seriously the responsibility to preserve it. We are NTD.
A major debate coming to a head in Congress, once again over the War Powers Act. Senate Democrats today are pushing to stop U.S. military operations in Iran and prevent President Trump from taking further action without congressional approval. The expected vote comes after Secretary of State Marco Rubio held a closed-door briefing with lawmakers last evening to discuss the developments in Iran. NTD's Melina Weisskopf has more.
The first vote in Congress on the Iran War Powers Act is happening later today in the Senate, but House Speaker Mike Johnson is also facing the possibility of the same vote being forced to the floor in the House, a move that he's described as dangerous.
Imagine a scenario where Congress would vote to tell the commander-in-chief that he was no longer allowed to complete this mission. That would be a very dangerous thing. You see that Iran is firing almost seemingly indiscriminately at targets. They're trying to intimidate America. They're trying to test our resolve.
The Speaker has insisted that this is an operation, not an official war. Therefore, Congress doesn't need to approve it. Last evening, Secretary of State Marco Rubio briefed lawmakers behind closed doors with the goal to reassure lawmakers that the administration's objectives were clear. The initial strikes aimed at wiping out Tehran's missiles and other military capabilities. While Republicans largely reiterated support for the administration's operation, many Democrats left that briefing with complaints, mainly over what they called a lack of planning and lack of congressional oversight.
They have shifting goals, different goals all the time, different answers every day, and I am truly worried about mission creep.
Now, to be clear, the administration has insisted that they do have clear objectives and strategies at play. But during a Pentagon briefing earlier this week, they said that they couldn't lay out for American people too many specifics to avoid tipping off the enemy. While most Democrats are questioning the administration, a few, including Congressman Greg Landsman of Ohio and Senator John Fetterman of Pennsylvania, say the strikes were justified.
You know what? This was overall a good thing. You don't have to agree on everything. So I'm going to be honest. So, why can't you just acknowledge that one of the most evil people on the face of the earth was erased? That's a good thing.
Senator Lindsey Graham said that Iran made a miscalculation when it retaliated by striking several nearby countries, but he added that it's had a good effect and that it's driven other countries in the Middle East to become more involved in the fight for stability in the region.
The countries now are more intent than ever to end the threat forever. So what I see in the coming days is more capability directed at the regime that's non-American, more planes flying that are non-Americans.
While the administration has insisted that the initial goal here was not to force regime change, President Trump is encouraging the people of Iran to seize the day to establish a new government. Reporting from Washington, D.C., Melina Weiskup, NTD News.
The Chinese regime has called for Iran, the U.S., and Israel to stop fighting, citing impacts to global economic growth. Joining us now is Daniel Lacaille, chief economist at Tressis Hedge Fund, international financial analyst, and author of the book Freedom or Equality. Daniel, good afternoon. Thank you for joining us once again. So a Chinese regime foreign ministry spokesperson posted on X today saying the Strait of Hormuz is an important international trade route and keeping the region stable benefits the international community. So I understand, Daniel, you wrote an article on your website about this. It's titled, Iran attack escalation may hurt China's economy more than anyone. So on this, can you just talk to us about it? Why does this conflict hurt China more than any other country?
Yes, if we look at the global implications, for example, for the United States, the economic impact is very limited. And as you can see in the stock market, the markets are not reacting to it. And it's also a producer of more than 13.8 million barrels a day. It's the largest oil producer in the world. Now, in the case of shutting down the Strait of Hormuz or the escalation of conflict with Iran, the most impacted negatively is China, because 80% of the traffic going through the Strait of Hormuz goes to China. Furthermore, China is importing almost 80% of everything that the Iranian regime is selling abroad. Therefore, it would not just be an impact of reduction in supply that could certainly hurt the economic activity of some of the Chinese factories, but also, and I think that this is the most important thing, is that China receives those products thanks to the US sanctions and thanks to the agreements with Iran at very, very low prices. And obviously, the alternatives, if there is not a disruption of supply, would be to purchase those goods from crude oil to jet fuel to naphtha, etc., at a significantly higher price. We're talking double, etc. So the entire negative impact of a disruption of supply from Iran would fall on the shoulders of the Chinese economy. And I think that is why they are so adamant about not being in a position of seeing the Strait of Hormuz being shut down.
So Daniel, as you know, this operation have already dramatically reduced tanker traffic through the strait. So let's talk specifics here. Can you give us some actual examples? What are the immediate and real-world impacts that you can think of on China and its manufacturing economy?
Number one, obviously, is that if the traffic going to China starts to disrupt the supply of jet fuel and the supply of naphtha, that would have immediate impact on the chemical industry and on the airline industry. That is obvious. The impact, obviously, is uncertain, but it can be from disruption of supply to having to look for alternatives at a much higher price. China will obviously try to get those products from, for example, Russia. But again, it is a very, very significant premium compared to the price and the conditions that they get from the Iranian regime. The shutdown of the Strait of Hormuz doesn't happen easily. Iran has tried to shut down the strait many, many times, but it's never done it. And what we have seen in the past 2 decades, in which shipping companies and global suppliers have grown accustomed to the idea that at some point there's going to be a threat due to geopolitical risk, is that most of those ships immediately have an opportunity to go through different routes to the west. That's why only 7% of the traffic of the Strait of Hormuz goes to the European Union, and less than 4% goes to the United States. So in essence, what we see is that this conflict is going to generate a very significant impact on the Chinese economy short term, driving higher the price of imports at best, or generating disruption in supply for key industries that are essential right now for their exporting activity.
So Daniel, is there any path for China to completely negate or offset its source of Iranian oil?
Oh, there is. Obviously, China has a strategic partner that is Russia, but it takes time. It takes quite a bit of time. It's not something that happens from one day to another, particularly in an environment like the one that we're living right now, in which there is global uncertainty and vessels have been diverted all over the world, no? So, for example, most of the oil that is stored at sea is stored in the west of the European continent, no? And that also part in the eastern coasts. And that is virtually impossible to bring to China and offset the volumes coming from Iran very quickly. The Iranian regime has said that they will allow any vessel with a Chinese flag to pass through the Strait of Hormuz. But that, to be fairly honest, is a bit laughable, because anyone that knows the Strait of Hormuz is a 34-kilometer wide strait in the most narrow side. And more importantly, anyone can suddenly change and put a Chinese flag and move on. No, so it defies all purposes. More importantly is that Iran shutting down the Strait of Hormuz shoots itself in the foot, because they stop receiving the enormous amount of reserves that they receive from exports. 80%, as I said prior, of the volume that goes through the strait is from Iran's own exports.
Yeah, I had to chuckle a little bit as well when you say a ship waving a Chinese flag would be allowed to pass through. Because as you were saying that, we were playing footage of how small the ships are in the waters. You could barely make out anything, let alone a flag on this ship. So the next question I have for you is, What would you say has been the cumulative impact, with the situation in Iran, but as well coupled with Venezuela, right, on China?
Oh, obviously, number one is that Venezuela and Iran were the number one and number two sources of supply of either free or heavily discounted oil. So imagine the profits that Chinese refineries were generating and the benefit for GDP, obviously much lower imports, and the benefits in terms of getting cheap or literally free, as in the case of Venezuela, oil. All of that is an enormous benefit for the Chinese economy. Right now, it'll have to find alternative suppliers. Those alternative suppliers are not going to be given oil for free or heavily discounted as Iran is doing, because they're not in the same difficult situation. And even if they are able to look for alternatives from Russia, it's not easy. Let's remember that Russia right now is not a big driver of the imports of oil from China because of the challenges of transport. So all of those elements are going to add to the cost of production, is going to add to working capital, and is certainly going to add to the negative impact on GDP from imports. Higher imports, lower GDP.
Okay, Daniel, just one final question. The Department of War has said that in the coming days, the operation will increase in intensity, with bombs hitting Iran harder. So I'm wondering here, because China has made the Belt and Road Initiative plans with Iran for many years, right? They have cooperated for at least a decade. So what is the impact on this?
Well, I think that the reason why the Chinese government has decided to move to have complete inaction in this decision of the United States and Israel is double. Number one is that they know that the regime is basically over. So it would make no sense to deploy billions of dollars in trying to defend it. The second is that they expect, as in Venezuela, that they will be able to maintain at least a significant proportion of the claims to property, reserves, or long-term contracts. So I think that it's basically a sort of policy of trying to reduce the negative damages, if that makes any sense. And I think that it's also very important to understand that by now we will start to see, as from now, in fact, if there is a change of regime, we'll start to get a lot of information about how much of those funds that have been provided by China and Russia have been squandered or literally stolen by the regime itself.
Okay, Daniel, great to hear your insight as always. Thank you for speaking with us.
Thank you very much. Have a great day.
London police have arrested 3 men suspected of spying for China. The suspects were detained in London and Wales for allegedly assisting a foreign intelligence service in violation of the country's National Security Act. These arrests come amid growing concerns about Chinese espionage and political interference in the UK. The UK's security service, MI5, warned last year that Chinese agents have made targeted and widespread efforts to recruit lawmakers and others. It says they have used LinkedIn and cover companies. Beijing denies the allegations. Security Minister Dan Jarvis has expressed alarm over what he calls an increasing pattern of covert activity from Chinese state-linked actors targeting UK democracy. And here in the United States, where violence against a faith group on the streets of New York City is raising concerns. Just a couple of days ago, video footage shows an Asian man assaulting a woman in Flushing, New York, while she was distributing flyers to call for an end to China's persecution of her faith. Security camera footage shows a man who appears to be Asian striking the woman, knocking her to the ground and running away. The woman's hat and glasses fell off during the assault. The attacker's face was recorded, and now police are investigating the incident. The woman was distributing flyers hoping to raise awareness of the ongoing persecution in China against her faith, Falun Gong, and calling on people to quit the Chinese Communist Party and its affiliated organizations. Falun Gong practitioners have been engaging in nonviolent demonstrations against the persecution for over 25 years. The White House calling Operation Epic Fury a resounding success. Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt today laying out President Trump's 4 objectives of the mission as well as the current progress.
Number 1, destroy the regime's deadly ballistic missiles and completely raze their missile industry to the ground. Number 2, annihilate the Iranian regime's navy. And so far, we have destroyed more than 20 Iranian ships, including their top submarine last night, using a torpedo for the first time since World War II. There is not a single Iranian ship underway in the Arabian Gulf, Strait of Hormuz, or the Gulf of Oman. Number 3, Operation Epic Fury will ensure the regime's terrorist proxies in the region can no longer destabilize the region or the free world and attack our armed forces. And thus far, Iran's proxies are hardly putting up a fight. Number 4, this mission will guarantee that Iran can never obtain a nuclear weapon.
The White House says U.S. forces have struck more than 2,000 targets, destroying hundreds of Iranian ballistic missiles, launchers, and drones. The U.S. expects to have complete and total dominance over Iranian airspace in the coming hours. Leavitt says Iranian ballistic missile launches are down 86% from day 1 levels. She adds that the president wants freedom for the Iranian people, but the White House stops short of explicitly listing regime change as one of the goals. So far, 6 U.S. service members were killed in the operation. The president will attend their dignified transfer. One of the other priorities of the administration at the moment is evacuating Americans from the Middle East.
Since the launch of Operation Epic Fury, more than 17,500 Americans have safely returned home from the Middle East, with over 8,500 American citizens returning home to the United States just yesterday alone. If you are a U.S. citizen in the Middle East looking to return to the United States, the Secretary of State asks that you please register with the State Department at step.state.gov. The State Department will identify where you are and provide travel options directly to you.
And Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent says Trump's global 10% replacement tariff is set to rise to 15% later this week. More news after this break. Don't go away.
According to ancient Chinese medicine, purslane is considered a medicinal herb and is used to help lower cholesterol, improve vascular functions, and prevent diabetes. Perilla seeds can nourish the lungs and spleen. It is used to treat asthma and improve pulmonary functions. Puritang green vegetable omega-3 is made from purslane and perilla seeds from Hwangmae Mountain in South Korea. It contains over 90% of omega-3, 6, 7, and 9. The highest concentration possible without chemical additives. The soft gel is made of natural seaweed. It is 100% organic and vegan. Both adults and children can take it with peace of mind. Ancient recipes were passed down from heaven to bring prosperity and longevity. Puritang green vegetable omega-3.
Hi, I'm Jane Seymour, and I spent years on TV playing a doctor. But I learned about the heartbreaking reality of heart disease and stroke when they touched my own life. My father nearly died before having a quadruple bypass and valve replacement that saved him. And my mom, who was my inspiration, suffered a stroke that took away her speech, her ability to move, and ultimately her life. To see someone so vibrant, so positive, who'd survived so much in life, be debilitated by a stroke, it was devastating, and also a wake-up call. And that's why I'm so passionate about supporting the American Heart Association. They're doing more every day to stop needless deaths. But they simply can't do their life-saving work without you. So please, call now or go to helpheart.org. And for only $19 a month, just 63 cents a day, your donation will go to work to do amazing things, like fund the next medical breakthrough, get the next person trained in CPR, and the next hospital certified in high-quality cardiovascular care. I hope that you'll open your heart right now and join me. Please, call now or go to helpheart.org Give $19 a month, and we'll send you this special t-shirt that you can proudly wear to show that you're part of a community of monthly donors who are helping save lives. A healthy heart is the spirit of life. It makes it possible to do the things that you love, to spend time with your friends and family and fulfill your life's dreams. But so many won't have that chance. Heart disease is America's #1 killer and the #1 killer of women. And that's why I'll do whatever I can to make sure others don't die from heart disease before their time. So please join me. Call the number on your screen or go to helpheart.org and help save even more lives. Thank you.
President Trump is set to meet with the leaders of major tech companies, including Google, Meta, and OpenAI. The meeting is aimed at protecting consumers from rising electricity costs amid the rapid expansion of energy demands in data centers. Tech companies are investing billions in new artificial intelligence computing capacity that draws vast amounts of electricity. As November's midterm elections approach, voters are expressing concerns about energy affordability and data centers straining the country's power grids. Trump announced what he called a ratepayer protection pledge in a State of the Union address last week. As part of the pledge, tech companies would commit to measures to ensure AI infrastructure doesn't drive higher utility bills for households and small businesses. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent says tariffs could be on their way up. He says raising the temporary global import tariff from 10 to 15% will likely be implemented sometime this week.
And again, that's under something called Section 122, and that's a 150-day authority. And during that time, during the 150 days, we will see studies from U.S. TR on Section 301 tariffs, from Commerce on Section 232.
Bessent also predicted that by August, U.S. tariff rates would effectively return to levels seen before the Supreme Court struck them down. The court ruled last month that the president exceeded his authority by imposing tariffs. Trump then signed a new order under a different law for a global 10% tariff. Minnesota Governor Tim Walz defending himself in a probe of alleged fraud. He is testifying before the House Oversight Committee today.
Federal prosecutors estimate that as much as $9 billion may have been stolen from just 14 Medicaid programs administered by the state of Minnesota. Those programs have cost taxpayers more than $18 billion since 2018, and investigators believe that half or more of that spending may have been lost to fraud. And that did not happen overnight. As our investigation has shown, it happened because state leadership failed repeatedly to intervene.
Although Minnesota's programs have overwhelmingly achieved their intended purposes, they're not immune from fraud. I'll be the first to acknowledge that. But let me be clear. In Minnesota, if you defraud public programs, if you steal taxpayer money, we'll find you, we'll prosecute you, we'll convict you, and we'll throw you in jail. In this anti-fraud mission, we keep good company. Across the country, our nation's governors work hard every single day to combat fraud in their programs. But even as we confront issues similar to our sister states, the people of Minnesota have been singled out and targeted for political retribution at an unparalleled scale.
The governor says he is committed to combating fraud and has created positions for this effort. He adds that Minnesota will do so without compromising assistance to those in need. He's also using the opportunity to voice his disapproval of the Trump administration's immigration enforcement operation in his state. Republicans on the committee accused the Minnesota governor of a failure of leadership. They say the leaders of Minnesota failed to act despite repeated warning signs of fraud.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Governor, why didn't you tell the truth? Why didn't you just tell the truth about the Feeding Our Future program? This program, my understanding, received $3 million the first year. Within a couple years was getting $200 million of taxpayer money. Whistleblowers raised concerns. As the chairman said, auditors raised concerns. Everybody raised concerns. March 30th, 2021, the payments are stopped. And a little over a month later, the payments are restarted. Why didn't you tell the truth about why you restarted the payments?
Well, Chairman, we did tell you. And Feeding Our Future grew because of the pandemic. And
I didn't ask that question. I said, why didn't you tell the truth about why you restarted the payments? The payments stopped because there were concerns, obviously, it wouldn't stop the payments. Then they're restarted a month later. What was the reason for restarting the payments?
my understanding was the agency believed that the court had required them to make those payments.
Democrats on the committee are saying the Trump administration's pause on federal funding is hurting those in real need. They say fraud investigations shouldn't punish those in need. Many of them also using their time to draw attention to immigration enforcement instead of fraud. Alongside the governor, Minnesota Attorney General Keith Ellison also testified. As this is a developing situation, we'll keep you updated on the latest information. The 2026 midterm election season kicked off yesterday with several high-profile primary elections. NTD's Daniel Monahan has the key takeaways.
In Texas, Senator John Cornyn has been pushed into a runoff against Attorney General Ken Paxton in the state's Republican Senate primary, one of yesterday's most closely watched races.
The statewide early results are in, and we did very well, as expected, and we were on to the runoff.
Cornyn is seeking a fifth term, but facing a tough challenge from Paxton, the state attorney general. He hopes to avoid becoming the first Republican senator in Texas history not to be renominated. Although Cornyn has expressed occasional skepticism of President Trump, he has been a reliable ally to the president. Paxton, however, says he is more aligned with Trump's Make America Great Again movement. President Trump didn't endorse either candidate during the primary, but the results may raise pressure on him to take a side. The two will meet in a head-to-head contest on May 26th. On the Democratic side, the Associated Press declared State Representative James Tallarico the winner over Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett in Texas's closely watched Democratic Senate primary. He'll face the winner of the runoff between Cornyn and Paxton. The Tallarico campaign stressed the unprecedented numbers of young voters, independent and Republicans supporting his campaign.
We are not just trying to win an election. We are trying to fundamentally change our politics.
Some voting uncertainty occurred in the contest. A Dallas County judge extended Democratic polling hours to 9 p.m. after early confusion left some voters turned away. Just before the extension ended, the Texas Supreme Court blocked the order, saying voting must proceed as permitted. U.S. Representative Crockett criticized the situation.
But I can tell you now that people have been disenfranchised. The reason that we knew that there were problems is because we were receiving the phone calls and the emails.
In a major Republican primary upset, CNN's Decision Desk projects that Texas State Representative Steve Toth will defeat Congressman Dan Crenshaw in the race for Texas's 2nd Congressional District. Crenshaw, a 4-term congressman and former Navy SEAL, faced criticism from the conservative wing of his party despite his ties to President Trump. His backing the resettlement of Afghani refugees and vote to certify the 2020 election results put him at odds with key MAGA supporters. Senator Ted Cruz endorsed Toth and appeared in a super PAC ad backing the challenger. And the November matchup for the U.S. Senate race in North Carolina is set, with Republican Michael Whatley and Democrat Roy Cooper facing off. Whatley won the GOP primary with about 64% of the vote, while Cooper secured the Democratic nomination. The winner will succeed Senator Tom Tillis, who chose not to run for re-election. Daniel Monahan, NTD News.
More than 17,000 Americans have returned from the Middle East amid ongoing U.S. strikes against Iran. The State Department says it will continue to actively assist any American citizen abroad who wishes to leave the region. More stories coming up after this break.
In 4 days. There was an old woman who lived in a shoe. She had so many children. She didn't know what to do. Did you have a good day at school? She gave them some broth without any bread. There you go. And kiss them all soundly. Night night. Good night. And put them to bed. Hunger is a story we can end. End it at feedingamerica.org.
大提琴不仅仅是一件乐器，它是有生命、有感情的，需要我们精心的照顾。往往我们一个小小的动作，可能都会对人情绪产生微妙的影响。天音的品牌是福星，我们对于传统的理念很荣幸被神韵艺术团选为指定供应商。时间是酿造音色的不可替代的陪伴。我跟大提琴已经有60多年的友情了，每一把琴都有它自己的个性，熟悉它，才能真正发挥它的潜力。